Thank you for tuning in to the Peoplz and Dragons. If you enjoy the content we provide, then subscribe, like, and maybe join in on the action at www.pndrpg.com. Haven City. An ugly city. Episode 11. Ritual of the Endless. Part 2. We cut to Looper Kin back in the back seat of a taxi leaving the coast. Aimless, he looks out of the window, viewing the cityscape from his freshly evolved eyes. He kind of felt violated. He was getting used to the blindness, and Haven City wasn't nothing pretty to look at either. Hours later, Looper orders his 9th cup of Steel Blocks coffee, spiked with Dolomin spice. He and an older friend, who also frequents Steel Blocks coffee and donuts, share a good laugh, as well as being miserable together. The world is shit. It's always been shit. And that's why I didn't have kids. You see, Looper shouts with his utmost belligerence. Just then, broadcasting on live television above the bar, the Wang Gang can be seen burning down a school and roasting students alive on the front steps. Looper sees this and is overcome with fury. He's had enough. He may not be in the position or have the allies to deal with the technomaniac wielding a magic glove, but he damn sure could handle some delusional mutant shitbag. Looper flashes his Steel Blocks card, paying for everybody in the bar's tab, then drunkenly stumbles out of the shop. His buddy tries to stop him, but fuck that. We cut to a fuming Looper marching toward the school, hand cannon drawn. A sober Looper would not be marching toward an entire group of Wang Gang elites. This was suicide. Looper cocks his pistol, when suddenly, appearing in front of him, we see the same mysterious horse and carriage, driven by the mysterious driver. Looper stumbles back while looking up at the big, grim visitor, wondering if maybe he died on the way here and didn't know it. With a deep, ethereal hum that was oddly intelligible, the grim visitor convinces Looper to not throw his life away and invites him to serve a larger purpose. Looper Kin turns and looks at his district. He doesn't believe in anyone anymore. Not Haven Guard, not the Gate Center, and definitely not the Western Ward Constabulary. Looper accepts the invitation and drunkenly pulls his block self onto the carriage, where they ride off into the darkness. Looper feels himself come to an abrupt stop, waking him from a much-needed nap. He was tensed up, and his hand on his cannon. He finds himself in a dark cavern. In the distance, a large blue fire pit sitting under a menacing statue of a harpy. Looper can see 2 figures standing nearby the flame looking over at him. The grim visitor says nothing and points toward their direction. Looper cautiously makes his way toward them and finds himself in the company of others also chosen and led here. Poke Turner, well behaved for the time being, sits crouched over by the blue fire pit, tossing in centipedes and watching them vanish. Half cloaked and standoffish, we see Aerald surveying everyone around him, more concerned about the creepy bug-eyed child than the worn-out old. Half cloaked and standoffish, we see Aerald surveying everyone around him, more concerned about the creepy bug-eyed kid than the worn-out old wardenary. Looper nods to them, but the bulk of his attention was placed on the 3rd figure that no one even realized was there. They, or it, had a presence. It had shape and form. It was one with the darkness and was that of everything the light didn't touch, but Looper could see the source. The depth of darkness he saw was too unnatural. Suddenly, white eyes appear and lock with Looper's. Looper tightens the grip on his pistol and gives an intense gaze back. 4 harpy women soar from out the darkness and land on the statue looking over her. She steps out of the dark, and the majority of the room's darkness is vacuumed up into her eyes, nose, and mouth. They all realize they are standing inside of an underground bayou cemetery. Above them, we see corpses suspended in mid-air as if hung from invisible trees. She seemed to be a child, yet her voice was undefinable. Her presence brought upon an overwhelming fear of darkness, an instinctual, primitive fear. I am the Queen of Darkness. Poke Turner, Looper, and Arold all turn to her as she unveils herself. With mesmerizing cadence, she introduces herself as an angel with gifts, then enlightens them with the revelation of a higher purpose. All of them are suddenly struck with a spell of grief, causing black chains to manifest around their hearts, literally, and begin to constrict their hearts, causing them immense physical pain and racking them with sorrow. Looper, Poke, and Arold all fall to their knees, embroiled in despair. Janiva, the Queen of Darkness, grabs each of their faces with tendrils of darkness and guides them to her full attention. They begin to feel the pain fade just as highly advanced black armor begins latching and mobilizing on them until they are fully covered in dark, menacing armor that smells of death. Janiva introduces them to the Gygas, immaculate necro-fiend armor inherited by those chosen to protect the Endless. It was weightless, not only in the physical but in the mental, even capable of lifting one's burdens and sorrows. Their well-being since inheriting the Gygas was night and day. It was comparable to a euphoria or state of bliss, so much so that the thought of losing their Gygas armor was unfathomable. It instantly became a dependency. Looperkin can feel a natural fortitude in his body and begins to plot on what use he can make of it to take out Noxious. Poke Turner never felt so much power and begins to think about how to displace the entire planet into a black hole. Arold finally begins to feel the control coming back to his mind. It seems that the Gygas is most definitely the key to keeping Dracon suppressed. Janiva puts her hand out as she too becomes magically fitted with the same fiendish armor, except hers was silver and resembled Par-Gygas's but fitted to her small frame. She informs them that from this day forth on Gygas, their lives are bound to those they must protect, and so they shall forever enjoy the dark fruits of the Gygas. With hearts bound in black chains, Looper, Arold, and Poke Turner owe nothing to anyone but themselves, and in that, they found some peace. Ollie's eyes open and she finds herself in bed inside the Chosen Temple. Beside her, Cervantes' hat lay in a chair. Walking out of the showers, we see Cervantes letting her hair free, dressed in lighter weight pirate regalia. Allie shouts, "Yo, this place is wild cool, where are we?" A bubbly, excited, and wide-awake Allie leaps out of bed, taking in all of the Raylegarian aesthetics, reimagined by nature. Cervantes was surprised to see Allie on her feet so fast and tells her to relax. Allie flips off of the bed, boots up her life dock, and begins freestyling. "It's every day, yo, with the Gamma Haven flow. It's every day, yo, with the Gamma Haven flow." Allie twirls around Cervantes while her subscriber count begins to climb due to those Gamma bars, when suddenly she bumps right into an R-Type X appearing out of nowhere. Allie straightens up in the presence of the king and composes herself into an upright, disciplined Gokin. Allie bows and reports everything she knows about the rival families taking over in Raylegar, as well as the sitting king Rhydon's disappearance. She barely breathes when reporting it and nearly passes out before being caught by Cervantes. He welcomes Ali and Cervantes to Shozan Temple and offers them rooms to stay. Ali beckons R-Type to take action as many Vinryusai and civilians are awaiting his return to the throne, especially now that it's under siege. R-Type hands her back her Yggdrasil sword and tells her that he has much more to do before returning to Rayleigh. Ali shouts, "But Starhalla's son!" Epony interrupts. "Star Rift, yes, we know. He visited." R-Type rubs his jaw. Cervantes, with no royal etiquette at all, questions what kind of king wanders away from his kingdom anyway. She then sets her eyes on Epony and flirts. "I think I see what makes this king wander away. Island fever, huh? R-Type ignores her rudeness and invites Ali to disband the Vinryusai and become a member of his personal Gokin. Epony hands Ali her Shozan garb, and she accepts it, ecstatically. As long as she was aligned with the true king of Rayleigh, she could do no wrong. "Hold up." Cervantes busts in between and asks why she hasn't been invited to the Gokin. R-Type X analyzes her and notices nothing out of the ordinary other than her big, thick, gassed-up head. Epony says to R-Type, "Sometimes our strengths lie beneath the surface. Far beneath in some cases." "I got something underneath for you," Cervantes shouts. "Hell, I can show you all a thing or two. All those fancy martial arts aren't shit." Cervantes jiggles her breast and poses in a fighting stance. With weaponized beauty, Cervantes invites them all to challenge her Oppai Jutsu. This causes R-Type X to smile, and he also invites her to the Gokin. He turns away and begins leaving the room. He stops and tells him that group training starts tomorrow. As soon as he's gone for good, Ali busts out the life dock and begins to celebrate her accomplishments with her fan base. Reflector, Janova, and Star Rift watch her live stream from the Reflectoverse. Star Rift rubs his chin while holding the fist of anarchy in his hands, contemplating his next moves. Drav sits in the back seat of a Wangang Jeep, soaking wet after being salvaged from the ocean where he was found floating face down. All Drav can remember is offering shots of Dolamin spice to Deftude and being attacked. Whatever happened, it left Drav with a strange otherworldly aura that even he sensed. It felt like he didn't belong. The Wangangers avoid eye contact with their leader, creeped out by the lingering energy surrounding him. Javko Maz makes a few phone calls and disperses goons across the entire city to capture the most talented bioscientists and animal experts to experiment on the eggs that he has stored. Hours later, we see Javko Maz walking out of a burning school with the God King Noxious Wang, who throws a professor down the steps. Wangangers scoop him up and toss him into a van. Drav then gets a call and is notified that they have several mutologists hostage. Dravko is pleased. He commands Noxious to scour the city for any and all pirates and get them for all the eggs and gamma creatures they can. Noxious can sense something very off-putting with Dravko, and his plans to stab him in the back have been postponed until he can figure it out. Drav gets into his vehicle and heads to the hidden labs. His plan to speed up the hatching process and enhance the eggs was unfolding nicely. Of all the gangs under his command, the Wangangers have been the most efficient, and Drav considers making Noxious Wang a general. He'll continue to observe. Nam-Ki sits waiting in a sexy dim-lit room. Sitting beside her on a plush fur sofa is Alex, still unconscious from the fall. Two guards with guns stand and watch them closely. a handsome and roguish-looking gentleman comes walking in wearing a long fancy coat with neon lights on the interior. He recognizes Nam Ki and for a moment thought he saw a ghost. Nam sees him and is unbothered by the past that they share. Her emotions were mute. He struggles to find a way to start the conversation, but Nam cuts right to the chase. She shoves a bag of bizquirks that she owes him into his chest and tells him that she's looking for work. There's a brief pause and a moment of silence. He looks into her eyes and sees nothing. Well, Nam asks. He nods toward Alex Crow and asks Nam who that is. My partner, she replies. Good, you're gonna need one. He begins to explain the trouble his escort service has run into as of late. Running a ring of escort services designed to infiltrate high-profile cultists was usually an explosive and lucrative living. Every night, a magic artifact or treasure map was being pilfered, and the bills were getting paid. This was until these brothels started showing up all around Haven City. Their services have been putting them to shame, and most of all, has garnered the attention of almost all of their cultist clientele. Nam is intrigued. Being an ex-escort herself, she was very comfortable in the underground scene. It was also obvious that the beauty she possessed eclipsed any escort found in any brothel. She accepts the task of investigating why cultists are so damn interested in these brothels, but she demands her pay up front. The man hands her back the satchel of bizquirks and welcomes her back. He then tells her to be careful. Their last investigator, Eden Hargrave, never returned and was last seen being chased out of there. We cut to Nam and Alex Crow, dressed up as patron and escort, standing in front of the brothel. After being greeted by many escorts of all shapes and sizes, they are led to their seat. Alex isn't too excited about the job he was signed up for, but he couldn't complain. Nam looked great in that dress. They split up and Alex is told to look casual, while Nam surveys the joint. Following the path of the cards, Nam crosses paths with a group of shady guards who all surround her. They ask her to step away and follow them. Nam has no idea why they were singling her out, so she decides to play it cool and go along with it, as opposed to breaking out into a fight. As soon as Nam is led to the back, she is then knocked out clean by a hammer fist to the back of the head. Nam awakens in a dark room. Across from her sits Alex Crow, tied up as well. A mysterious voice speaks to them from where they cannot see. Whoever it was, they seem to know a lot about Nam Ki and Alex. Their troubled pasts, their inner demons. They then insinuate that this brothel is tied to way more than just sex, fun, and games, and that they have been chosen. An old woman dressed in a cloak that made her appear somewhat invisible steps out of the shadows. Selena Wren's underling wears around her neck an enchanted talisman that is likely the source of her all-knowing. She invites Nam Ki and Alex Crow to join their family, their network. Nam looks up with her multicolored eyes, just as the cards predicted, she thinks. She drew the reunion bridge this morning, the card of being reunited with what was taken from her. In this case, a purpose, that mysterious unknown that she always reveled in, unless she's misunderstanding the meaning. Nam Ki speaks for her and Alex and agrees, disbanding her mission and joining the brothel's mysterious network. Tempest awakens at 3 a.m. on the dot. He isn't sure why he's awake, but he is. He thought surely he'd get a night's rest after the strain he put on his brain the night before. Tempest takes a walk and goes to check on his daughter, Amelia, who is fast asleep, Chronicle reading a book beside her bed. He then heads to the roof, and through his binoculars checks on Nindra Bello, who he sees sitting next to her close friend and gate captain, O'Glaren. Grown in a blood-vein lab, O'Glaren was created by Emperor Bai Wong himself, spliced with the DNA of the most resilient races, the Wardenary and Raylagarian, and then they super-spliced it with a golden blood liger. O'Glaren has always remained close to Nindra Bello since she saved him, and they had a deep history. He was the first gate agent overseas in the Nibu sector, so he could remain close to her, and it was no surprise how he became captain. He was truly a force of nature. A tiny black nanobot crawls across Tempest's binocular lens. Then suddenly, he is stung with a minor zap that almost causes him to drop the binoculars entirely. Tempest pulls the binoculars away and smacks the insect off, then places them back. He senses movement in the Nibu planes ahead, and so he adjusts the night vision and then focuses them. Several Nibu aircraft and land vehicles can be seen headed toward their location. Tempest notifies his units and begins to wake everyone while running down the steps into the building. They've been discovered. Nebi ships glide over the town, dropping Nebi warriors into it. Once they hit the ground, they begin chopping down any and every inhabitant of the town. Another veteran agent, Vimius, bursts from out of his station and into the courtyard, swinging and twirling about like a tornado of bladed weapons that morph like balloons into balloon animals, except from axes into swords that rip, shred, slash, and gorge enemies in his path. Nibu's gate agents were more battle-hardened, likely due to their Psyquadrian taskmaster, Vimius, master of weapons. Nebi blood paints his black fur, and his glorious long purple hair blows within the gale of his fury as he skewers a pair of Nebi soldiers simultaneously, then eviscerates them with his mighty axe swing. Enemies strike at him from all angles, but with impeccable combat prowess and strategic footwork, Vimius morphs both of his bladed weapons into a double-edged plasma scythe and begins dicing through crowds of Nebi enemies while trampling them with all four of his cybernetic hooves. Nebi gunners begin firing at Vimius with Atlas artillery, but it's all soaked up by an energy barrier erected by O'Glaren, who ergo-ports in between deadly firepower and Master Vimius. O'Glaren stands with one hand out effortlessly holding up the barrier, absorbing all of the incoming kinetic energy. He awaits for Vimius to give the tactical breakdown. Vimius finishes up the attackers nearby and waits for the rest of the agents to rally around him. Vimius reads the field and calls for the O-strike. Gate agents begin to take to high ground in the town and provide fire support as O'Glaren ergo-ports behind enemy lines with glowing gauntlets of energy and begins thrashing through his targets with devastating chops and strikes, exploding with kinetic force on impact. Several soldiers charge at O'Glaren, but O'Glaren energy dashes right past them. His presence was so overwhelming that they all hyperventilate and die of heart failure in seconds. O'Glaren engages his closest target, chops their rocket launcher in half, then sends his gauntlet straight across their torso. A larger, Nebi warrior with a buff-ass neck comes charging with chi-empowered swords, but O'Glaren parries them both with both claws and begins to maul the warrior's entire neck with his powerful liger jaws. This assault pushes enemies outward, spreading them thin, as Vimius' assault crushes them from the outside, pushing them inward, hence the O-strike. Tempest grabs Amelia and alerts Chronicle as they head for their plane gliders parked in the back of town, but soon are intercepted by more Nebi warriors. Two lunge at Tempest, but Tempest hops back as they both step into a temporal anomaly that begins aging them 30 years for every muscle they move while struggling until they are crushed under their own armor within seconds. An ugly sight. Chronicle blasts magnetic pulses, sending the soldiers in their armors spiraling into each other, impaling their allies in the process. An Atlas rocket is launched from a passing Nebi craft that blows up Tempest's getaway vehicles and leaves them with no way to escape the town. Tempest holds onto Amelia tight as Chronicle lifts them into the air with his magnetic pulses and carries them safely into another building for cover as more and more Nebi reinforcements arrive. Vimius, O'Glaren, and a small group of Gate and Nebi rebels keep their enemies at bay while Tempest thinks of a plan. Eventually, Nebi soldiers begin to force Tempest and his party away from Vimius and O'Glaren and into a tight alleyway within the marketplace. Tempest runs with his daughter and Chronicle through the tight space until they run into more soldiers trapping them. Tempest was not willing to combat such deadly warriors with his daughter in tow. All of the Nebi soldiers begin to charge toward Tempest with chi-empowered weapons drawn, just when both sides of the alleyway in front and behind Tempest explode with death, flame, fireworks, and confetti, causing the buildings to collapse on their enemies, crushing them and blowing the rest to pieces. Mud, clay, and blood cover Tempest and his daughter head to toe. As the destruction settles, we see Jacob Bastian pull himself out of the rubble with black op night goggles on, holding a detonator in one hand and pulling debris out of his beard. "Hot damn," he shouts in a cool and collected manner. "Hey, a little help here?" Jacob suddenly blinks away, then reappears 5 feet in the air in front of Amelia and lands ass first on a pile of clay bricks.
My bad.
Right behind him, a black assassin blinks in place, dying of laughter. He had several masks plastered all over his head, each flashing with holographic facial expressions of laughter that glowed lime green. Jacob hops onto his feet and cracks his back. "Hey there, young lady." Jacob greets Amelia with whiskey breath and a large piece of shrapnel poking out of his head, snipping an active, gushing blood vessel. He just about scares the shit out of the girl. Chronicle swiftly steps in front of Amelia and with a swipe of his hand forces the shrapnel to flip horizontally in Jacob's skull, causing agonizing pain that begins to lift him in the air. Jacob's ally assassin, Killjoy, flips into action and slashes open the vacuum in time and space that begins to suck Chronicle into it while shredding up his flesh. Tempest interferes and attempts to disable Killjoy's powerful time distortion, but finds it almost impossible to control with the time he's pulling from the debris around him. Tempest then begins to pull from Killjoy's special sword, the Araman Blade, where he finds a surprisingly infinite pool of time, empowering him to freeze the distortion for good. Tempest shouts, "Enough!" He calls off Chronicle, and soon after Killjoy yields. "We are allies." Chronicle lowers his hands and apologizes. Jacob crawls back to his feet holding his head, his wounds slowly healing. "I thought you'd be happy to see us. We're here to pick you up from Nebu summer camp." Suddenly, everything begins to rumble and shake. Everyone, including the Nebi soldiers, look up and bear witness to a massive ring-shaped craft that comes zipping toward them, then to a complete stop as if leaving warp speed. What fills the sky above was a gigantic mobile base and Jared's first Mastercraft creation. Keeping to his word, Jared brings Tempest a gift and a symbol of the Gate and Haven Guard's legendary alliance, the Haven Gate. We cut to Haven Gate's bridge as we see everyone stumbling and falling from the jarring stop from the warp lunge. The entire shelf of alcohol behind Jacob's built-in bar flies out, sending his favorite beverages shattering across the bridge floor. Jacob can hear the calamity in his earpiece and screams into his receiver, "Damn it, Jarrett, you're spilling the Dulaman fire whiskey." Jarrett pulls himself up with a great big smile, ecstatic that the warp lunge worked flawlessly, though he may need to install some more railings and handles for passenger stability. Tempest looks into the sky and marvels at the Haven Gate base. He knew that this was the handiwork of Jared, the creator. We see Ninja Bello running across the marketplace courtyard toward Tempest and party, escorted by Nebi rebels, when enemy soldiers intercept their path and kill her escorts. As soon as they take a step toward her, O'Glaren ergoports in front of them and wastes no time slaughtering all 3 of them with his energy cestus. He then grabs Ninja and energy dashes out of the line of fire. Tempest thanks O'Glaren and points up at Haven Gate. And without wasting any time, O'Glaren begins ergoporting them to Haven Gate's bridge 2 at a time. Once Tempest is brought on board, John Blake, aka Circuit, a young Haven punk, leaps over the rail and attempts to inform Tempest about the significantly large data cache that he just stole from Anarchy 12, as well as other important news, but is pushed out of the way by a young Dulaman woman sporting an impressively modified Gate agent uniform. The cute Maria Felicia a freshman gate agent who had to return home to Atla to care for her parents. She was a phenom and was considered one of Gate's most capable recruits with the most potential, so much so that the door was always left open for her should she decide to return to Gate. She was always a fan of Tempest, especially for all that he has done with the destruction of the Survey Day. She bombards him with fandom, respect, and a great big hug. He was just as happy to see her, however not too excited to tell her about Judge Benedict's demise. Circuit gathers his balance back and wipes himself off as he makes sure his Neo Slayer's handheld wasn't cracked. He then tries to get Tempest's attention as Maria floods him with more questions about the massacre, survivors, and R-Type X. All right, fall back you two, Jacob grumbles. That was a sour topic for both he and Tempest. We need you both up there. Jacob points to the stratagem map hub. Maria smiles, her pink lipstick glistens. Then she leaps back up to the map and continues giving orders to the rebels. Circuit persists. But, Jacob cuts him off. Not now, Circuit, we're under attack. Circuit sucks his teeth. Perhaps he'll tell Tempest about the Sector 12 blackout and how he hacked the shit out of Atlas's accounts later. Although, intel about the Fist of Anarchy seemed pretty damn important. A weapon of mass destruction? Circuit tables it though. He respected Jacob. And he jumps up back into the stratagem map and takes orders from Maria. Her tactical guidance has proved itself many times over. Suddenly, Tempest spots a trio of incoming rockets and shouts to alert everyone as he grabs his daughter and dives to the floor. But giant plates begin to orbit around the base at light speed and end up deflecting the rockets and all other incoming fire. Tempest looks up, and there stands Jared with his helping hand extended. Don't worry, my friend. Haven Gate's defenses are exceptional. Tempest hasn't seen Jared since her funeral. It was a tough loss for Tempest, but even harder for Jared. He looked better these days. Jared pulls Tempest up. Ho, ho, ho. I should be wearing a red suit and jiggling my belly, Jared chuckles. You like what you see, Gordon? Tempest was speechless. Is that? Yes, indeed. Ginks. The hardest non-metal material known to man. A resource that only Jared knows about. Wow, Jared, that's amazing. Tempest was quite appreciative. He now felt more secure with his daughter. Thank you, Jared. A chubby, sloppy Dorinthian man in a lab coat and yellow sweatpants pops up beside Jared with a smelly porcelain and onion burger in hand. However, it was I who synergized the phosphorus coating. Jigsfree was Haven Guard's alchemical mastermind, who tagged along to have heroes use his experiments. Jared screams at him, Bah, so what? Jigsfree tightens his sweatpant drawstrings. What do you mean, so what? Would we be on this bridge breathing if the oxidants weren't synergized in a combustible Gink's chemical zone? Jared returns, the embryo engine would have to be running in trilateral gear for a decade before a Gink's chemical zone could oxidate any oxygen fumes, you idiot. Jigsfree steps on Jared's foot, and Jared smacks Jigsfree's sandwich out of his hand, and it goes flying into Chronicle's face. Amelia begins laughing hysterically as Chronicle wipes the onion off of his nose. Tempest asks Jared where the safest quarters are for his daughter and Nindra, and has Chronicle take them there. Jacob, Tempest, Jared, and Jigsfree congregate to discuss how to deal with the current Nebi threat and escape Nebu when suddenly, Tempest is overcome with a muscle-locking epiphany. A crystal-clear vision of every living being afflicted with a terrible virus that causes various crippling and problematic effects. He then sees all of his friends and foes across the entire planet racked with the same illness. He's experienced the same vision before, but just not as clear. It seems like the more proficient he becomes, the more visions he's been having. A vision as powerful as this had to have been placed by a temporal anomaly created by a future Tempest. A Tempest may be so proficient with time allocation, he found a way. This premonition gave him the feeling that whatever decision was made in the past better not happen again. Tempest snaps back to reality with a minor concussion and a sharp pain fissuring his pineal gland. Barely able to form words, he fumbles but finally musters the strength to speak a warning with one word. Knocks. Suddenly, a large navy blue juggernaut of a ship comes warping through the clouds and crashes into Haven Gate's orbital shield belt, deflecting the ship's path, causing enormous damage to itself. Jarrett holds on. A large mechanical arm shoots out of his backpack and pulls a lever that triggers the Haven Guard to begin repelling the Knox ship away. Knox operatives jetpack toward the town below, and some are sent to survey the Haven Gate structure, but are easily blasted to pieces when they collide into its force fields. The Knox agents that drop into the small town kill and maim remaining Nebby forces with advanced toxic weaponry that seems to neutralize them almost instantly. Organized and efficient, they then make it their priority to take innocent hostages and manage to take some remaining Gate agents as hostages as well. They knew they were dealing with heroes. Jacob shouts to Circuit, asking for the details on the Knox Corp. Circuit informs everyone of their genocidal master plan as well as them being pioneers in the fields of biogenetics. Tempest puts two and two together as he recalls the viral outbreak in his vision. Tempest suggests that they pull out the remaining agents with O'Glaren's ergoportation, but it's too late. We cut to the town below and see Hunter fully mobilized within his Neo-suit. It was an incredible technological specimen that garnered respect and awe as he stood there tall and unyielding. In his grip was the neck of a Gate agent veteran, a G-type who could read the stars, predict the weather, and was a father or two. It's just another cancerous mass to Hunter. Knowing that he was being watched, Hunter looks up at Jacob and Tempest inside of their craft and demands that they hand over Nebu's captain bioengineer, Ninja Bello, or his mutant comrades will die an agonizing death before him. Why Ninja Bello? Jacob asks aloud. Circuit answers. It's because she's better than them at what they do. He was right, and the bulb comes on. Jacob jumps on the intercom and asks Hunter why did they want her, but Tempest interjects. He wasn't even going to consider handing them a master geneticist. He saw what happens. Tempest knows where he went wrong in another lifetime. He wasn't going to let it happen again. He tells Jacob that they're going to have to fight and buy time. Maria adds that we do have the numbers to fight. Circuit counts 120 aboard and 80 in town. Maria points at the stratagem map to show that if any more Nebby arrive, things will not pan out for them. Jacob trusts Tempest. Their alliance was sound. Like Gate, Haven Guard was another symbol of hope and resists all forms of tyranny. Cool-headed and collected, Jacob speaks into the base's intercom and rallies his most trusted and seasoned allies with his vision. A vision of hope that is shared with Tempest, who stands beside him. Tempest tells Jacob to have Haven Guard buy time on the ground and support O'Glaren while he extracts soldiers. Tempest pulls Jared aside and asks him if he's ready. Jared anxiously nods yes. Tempest smiles and asks him to take him there. Meanwhile, we cut back to the Neo-suit Hunter, who was issuing one last chance to hand over Ninja Bello or lose an agent. Hunter gives no countdown and proceeds to kill the hostage when suddenly O'Glaren ergoports beside the captive, snatches him from Hunter, and energy dashes away. Shortly after, an army of Haven Guard are now in tow, armed to the teeth and in vehicles being airdropped toward the town. Hunter's superior tracking system traces O'Glaren's movements with ease and fires a high-speed metal cable that binds his legs, then yanks O'Glaren toward him. Just before reaching him, O'Glaren ergoports away with the hostage, then reappears behind Hunter, bringing with him Vimius, who brings a plasma axe across Hunter, but Hunter parries it with his arm and grabs the handle along with Vimius's and begins to overpower him in a contest of strength. Hunter's Neo-suit revs up quietly like a computer fan as it performs light work. Vimius gallantly leaps in strategic positions to gain leverage before he finally decides to morph the weapon, breaking free from their struggle. But by then, Hunter begins opening fire into Vimius, wounding him gravely, but Vimius morphs his weapon into a shield, gaining cover from the fire. Vimius holds his abdomen riddled with strange munitions. Hunter runs over at high speed and grabs Vimius' shield with both hands, lifting it up as Vimius holds onto it as best as he can before being thrown into a building. He hits the wall, but it'll take more than that. He's teleported back into the fray alongside O'Glaren as Vimius uses both weapons and powerful legs to attack Hunter. O'Glaren attacks with overwhelming ferocity. Hunter's armor begins to glow hot from O'Glaren's onslaught. "In the face of my might you shall fall!" The barrage of attacks became uncomfortable really fast for Hunter as O'Glaren struck with various energy weapons and strikes. Meanwhile, Haven Guard can be seen fighting Noct soldiers all around them. Noct's corpse weapons were advanced and triggered debilitating effects within G-Type 1s. However, many of the Guard were unawoken G-Types with badass weaponry courtesy of Jacob Bastion. Noct's corpse struggles against Haven Guard, but hold their ground thanks to their advanced exoskeleton suits, enduring the terrifying firepower coming from Jacob's handcrafted weapons. Hunter has enough and emits a field of nullification that puts out the roaring energy surrounding O'Glaren's limbs and also stuns him. Hunter's arm turns into a drill and he attempts to bore it into O'Glaren's head, but is deflected by Vimius, who then cracks Hunter across the body with a massive mace, sending him flying through a wall. But Jason Hunter immediately propels himself back onto his feet. Light work. Noct will put an end to all of you insects. Hunter detonates a mine that wraps Vimius in a laser net that melts to the touch, but is swiftly cut to pieces by the Iron Man blade that we now see being sheathed. Killjoy's many holographic faces expressed determination, and he was no longer laughing. He brought with him Maria Felicia, helping Vimius to his feet. She asks Vimius if he needs to retreat with Killjoy, and Vimius laughs. "I'm just getting started. I do this for my people." Maria smiles awkwardly. "Oh, okay. Good to hear." Her eyes begin to glow pink. Vimius points at O'Glaren's neutralized condition and warns her that the robot man has stunning neutralizing capabilities, and he doesn't like our people. She lets him know that she's aware, which was no surprise. Maria was an incredible tactician and has watched and studied all of Hunter's capabilities so far, courtesy of Circuit. She tells Killjoy to take O'Glaren to the base along with the last remaining agents. Killjoy blinks away with O'Glaren. Maria and Vimius prepare to re-engage Hunter, who is walking toward them with haste. Maria's entire body transforms into a state of pure pink energy, leaving no trace of her physical self. This is why she was known as Aurora by her gate trainers. She sustained impressive control of her enhanced state and could pull off incredible feats, including but not limited to lethal ninjutsu. Vimius leads the attack with dual-wielding blades as Hunter also runs toward him, meeting him halfway, resulting in a clash. All of Vimius' attacks are parried by Hunter's hands until Vimius outsmarts Hunter with a feint and thrusts into him with a spear, lifting him up. Hunter shatters the spear to dust with an ultrasonic vibration emitted from a gadget on his wrist, lands on his feet, and impales Vimius with the spear's edge that was previously inside of him. Aurora zips across the sky, expelling waves of energy in her path, all deflected by Hunter. When she reaches him, she forms into several balls of energy that surrounds him, then all of them collide, causing an explosion. Aurora doesn't wait for the smoke to settle and forms hundreds of seals with her hands within seconds, causing the smoke to form into hundreds of shurikens that begin to ravage Hunter, all while Vimius expertly keeps him on his toes. We cut to the inside of Haven Gate's barracks, where Amelia is being held safe, guarded by Chronicle. She asks Chronicle if he can take her to the cafeteria, but he kindly refuses to. Tempest wants her safe and under close watch. Suddenly, Chronicle starts acting strange, as if glitching out. Amelia runs to him, catching him before he falls to the ground. "Are you okay?" she asks. Chronicle plays it cool. Yes. Amelia's eyes widen as she peers over his shoulder, as if she's seen a ghost. Chronicle turns around, and standing before them, we see the beautiful Mistress Sheila Scorn. Chronicle stands on guard. He's never seen this person and is quite certain she isn't with Havengard. Mistress Scorn speaks with a warm and delightful tone, politely asking for him to hand over Amelia. Amelia runs to the back of the room, and Chronicle begins to charge up his magnetism, but fails as his body begins to shut down and malfunction. Within moments, all of the life that once filled his body fades away as he stumbles and wobbles like a toy robot before finally hitting the floor like a heap of machinery. Amelia runs over to Chronicle, her companion, crying for him to wake up when she realizes how artificial he appeared. His flesh was cold and semi-transparent where she could see an anarchy symbol beneath the surface. Chronicle was and has been an Anarchy 12 spy planted as a gate agent to learn and monitor Tempest's growth with time manipulation. A bevy of data has been collected thus far, but with Anarchy now in a vegetative state, with his mind locked in Selena's enchanted artifact of madness, Chronicle has been severed from Sector 12. Amelia looks up at Mistress Scorn, who looks sympathetic for the young girl. She stoops to her level and soothes her with alleviating words of care. Scorn knew taking this girl from her home was what was best for the planet. Scorn teleports away with Amelia. We cut to Jared and Tempest running through the corridors until they reach a special room. Jared smiles and shouts, "Behold," as he opens the door, revealing the Fold Room, one of many rooms that Tempest and Jared designed. The Fold was a location where Tempest could perform an incredible feat, a feat that he hopes he can pull off. The Time-Space Fold. This involved teleporting himself along with the whole base through space without killing himself. Tempest digs into his pocket and hands Jared an antidote and tells him it's strictly for him. Jared looks at the vial that reads, Himmel. Tempest tells him to take it when he tells him to, but if the Fold kills him, he should take it soon after. Jared remembers this and stows it away. Tempest jumps up onto the platform and takes a deep breath. He asks Circuit to bring him up to speed on the battlefield. Circuit tells Tempest that the battlefield isn't looking so good. Circuit has broken through several hexadecimal crypto gates and hacked 47 Nox percentage modules, a year's worth of hacking only in a quarter of an hour. He reports that there are 2 large Nebi armies approaching from the north. Our Nox Corp friends have a champion giving us problems on the ground, some kind of weaponized suit. It neutralized Uglaran and seems to be built to kill G-types. I'm also reporting that several of ours have been terribly poisoned and have lost their powers. We zoom into Circuit's awesome-ass helmet glowing orange with the flickering stripe. The real power is up here, though, he says while pointing at his noggin. Circuit dramatically swings both hands onto his keyboard, leaving a trail of neon light, and he begins typing at ultralight speed. With omnipotence, John Circuit Blake was his own god in the cyberspace. We cut back to the town where we see Hunter and Nox Corp fighting Aurora, Vimius, and Havengard. Circuit sabotages Nox Corp's power armors and weapons with the virus that causes massive delays in their functions and targeting protocols. This support tilts the scales heavily in Havengard's favor. Aurora shoots toward Hunter with flurries of strikes that he barely evades, periodically having to parry an attack from Vimius or warding him off with gunfire. Aurora zigzags around Hunter's pulse beams, toxic rounds, and laser nets, then somersaults into the ground, vanishing into pink smoke, then reappears up under Hunter and suplexes him into the ground. But he leaps onto his feet before she does and strikes her in the chest with an erect blade, barely missing her heart as she becomes insubstantial. Aurora strikes Hunter twice with palms of explosive pink energy, knocking him back some, then flourishes with a spinning drill kick that passes through his armor, penetrating an electrical weave. Jason Hunter feels this as his rib cracks from the impact. If it weren't for the electrical weave, she could have gone right through him. Wasting no time, a levitating Haven Guard sees an opening in a wounded Hunter and soars in from the sky with a sawed-off dayfucker-upper crafted by the Demolition Man himself. Hunter detects him and combat rolls out of the way. Aurora goes in for the kill, fist filled with vibrant and deadly pink energy when suddenly she begins spitting up water and blood, falling to the ground choking. Vimius signals to Parks, the flying Haven Guardsman, who then swoops in for another attack while coordinated with Vimius, who charges, twirling a double-bladed laser axe over his head. Hunter shoots a cable from his hand that captures Parks and then swings him into Vimius, resulting in Parks getting his arm severed off. Hunter then ignites the mine he secretly placed on Parks' back that explodes with a neutralizing concussion blast that not only suppresses their gamma abilities but causes crippling brain damage. Before Vimius' large Psyquadrian body could hit the ground, Hunter jet rockets around them in circles, constricting them in an unbreakable cable, binding and neutralizing them. Aurora writhes in pain on the ground as her internal organs mutate from the toxic blade, poisoning her blood and DNA. Hunter approaches, examining the effects of the new virus the captain wanted him to test. It was working as expected. Gamma overload, causing an overmutation created from modified gamma fiend cells. Soon gamma types all over the planet will know your struggle insect. Then one by one, Nox will come scrape you off of the street. Aurora, with all her might, leaps to her feet and attacks Hunter one last time, but is hit with a wave of neutralization, knocking her out of her transformed state. Maria falls on her back while drowning on the water that was once her intestine. Hunter looks up and sees a Nebu army approaching. We suddenly hear Jigfree's voice with a mouthful of porklum tots screaming in Maria's earpiece, "Do it now! Do it now!" Hunter turns back toward Maria, who we see lobbing a vial filled with a thin green liquid that shatters when it lands by Hunter's feet. Its contents erupt into a mist that is attracted to the heat of his Neo suit and begins to be sucked into the exposed electrical weave and vents. It seems to have an immediate effect. It begins to mutate and enlarge Hunter's heart, causing great agony, dropping him to his knees, clenching his heart, screaming in distress. Jigfree jumps into the air, barely leaving the floor. He celebrates the success of his new substance with extra ketchup on his next hot dog as he dances in his socks and throws his white lab coat over his shoulder. Hunter attempts to kill Maria one last time before retreating. His arm forms into a cannon and he aims and fires, but a rift in space is slashed open, sucking in all of the gunfire. Appearing behind Hunter, Killjoy warps in place and slashes him in the back, followed by a swift kick right into the rift of space. Jason Hunter is sucked into the hole and reappears miles away, falling from the sky. We see an army of Colonel Ty Lee clones stand guard in between their allies and the approaching Nebi warriors charging on foot. Colonel Ty Lee buys time for Killjoy to teleport Maria, Vimius, and everyone else to the base. Hunter sits up and puts his suit in life support mode, buying him more time to complete his mission. He wasn't going back to his ship without Ninja Bello and the Ender virus. Hunter calls in the Nox captain and tells him that the virus works and to deploy it now. The captain greenlights the launching of the virus, and within moments, the great Nox satellite drops a bomb in between all of the continents that explodes inside of the atmosphere, inseminating the entire planet with the virus. The same virus Maria has. The same apocalyptic virus Tempest foresaw, except now the entire planet will feel its effects within days. Nebi warriors clash with an army of Colonel Ty Lee's, whose hand-to-hand combat was ineffective on the soldiers' chi armor and weapons. However, the Colonel's trickery gave him an edge, resulting in warriors attacking their allies and missing their targets entirely. With all of Haven Gate and innocent town civilians evacuated onto the ship, they now needed to escape from Nox and Nebi forces. After buying Tempest a significant amount of time, Colonel Ty Lee becomes overwhelmed by the Nebi forces and begins to falter. We cut to Tempest with both hands firm on the handles of the space-time fold machine, focusing all his mental willpower into this ginormous task. I need More time! Tempest growls as his fedora flies off of his head. The real Colonel Ty Lee flips and evades the Nebby attackers with tactful illusions, holding them off as much as he can, when suddenly a massive tidal wave carrying an entire Azorian army led by King Obadiah appears. Marshal Mesa in his new blue skin lands into a crowd of Nebby attackers and begins wailing on them with his oversoul state. His attacks transcend the physical plane and shatter the chi forms of all of the Nibunis. Marshall's mind, severed from his own reality, consents that this is surely one of the last moments to shine as the scene comes to an end, and because of his hypercognitive revelation, he shows out and shows off with amazing combat ability. King Obadiah leaps off of the tidal wave and tackles a group of Nebby like a torpedo that explodes with raging waters. Obadiah twirls, skews, and beheads his foes as Mima, the sexiest mouse, flies overhead in a Mimatron now outfitted with Azorian technology and rains death upon the corrupt Nebby foes. Obadiah tells Haven Guard to escape and his army will take care of the rest. Killjoy brings Ty Lee and Marshall on board as Mima stays behind talking shit while killing Nebby. When she finally returns and is led in by Jacob, she is trailed by Hunter, who tackles her Mimatron into the bridge's operations panel. Mimatron tries to fight back, but her suit seems to have been disabled by a Nox status cuff. Hunter tosses a neutralization grenade toward the entire group, and they are all blown up and sent flying over the bridge while powerless. Hunter scans the entire base in seconds and detects Ninja Bello deep within the confines and heads toward her. Jacob, unbothered by the neutralization, tackles Hunter but breaks his arm and shoulder upon Hunter's fortuitous form. Hunter's hand forms into a machine gun, and he lets off incendiary rounds into Jacob, sending him flying backward and over the balcony. Hunter continues to walk, stepping over the incapacitated and/or neutralized mutants in Haven Guard, and walks right into Circuit, the last G-type to stand in between Hunter and Nindra. Hunter scans him. Circuit's vitals display across Hunter's eyes when suddenly the display begins to glitch out and hundreds of pop-ups containing Nibuni's porn flood his vision. Circuit then begins controlling Hunter's suit like a Neo Slayer character in his games and forces him to deactivate life support mode, sending Jason Hunter down a path of immediate death if not taken care of. He then forces Hunter to run in the opposite direction and hurl himself off of the ship bridge, just in time. For we would all bear witness to the ultimate sleight of hand trick. Tempest teleports the entire Haven Gate mobile base out of Nibu. Serenity sits in the passenger of the Dizzy Wizard's small ship as he sings incredibly catchy tunes that get stuck in her head. They were leaving a Nebby coastal town for a grocery run and were now on their way to Haven City, or so it seemed. Serenity didn't know where this strange man was taking her, but it sure has been a ride so far. The Dizzy Wizard, with a mouthful of sour and sugary candy, hits a high note and holds it. It was pleasant and not bad at all, Serenity thinks. It was weird feeling like you were being held against your will, but enjoying it. Serenity was mature, no doubt, but the suppressed teenager in her burst out and she begins to sing along with the Dizzy Wizard as they soar across the sea. The Dizzy Wizard sets coordinates for their next destination, and he gets up and begins dancing as somehow the tune he just created becomes an actual song blaring through his sweet-scented spaceship. Serenity hops up with him and the two begin to dance and sing along with each other to lyrics they make right up then and there. The Dizzy Wizard uses his candy magic called Flavor Capacity, and the two are zapped by a brisk lemony blast of charged up fizz-whiz, invigorating them to perform amazing dance feats beyond their usual ability. Serenity has never had this much fun in her life. The Dizzy Wizard ends the song on a high note, and the two slide down a mountain of candy and land right into the cockpit seats. The wizard leans over to her and says, "Now that we're warmed up, it's time for a candy adventure." And he points out the windshield. Serenity sees a beautiful island not too far from the island of monsters. It's where they were headed. Serenity asks why they were going to this island, to which the dizzy wizard stops, starts thinking to himself, pulls out both hands and counts on his fingers, and snaps his fingers and says, "Oh yeah, we're here for candy." Then he leaps off of the ship onto the beach. Serenity likes candy, but she doesn't think about it and assumes it's just some more silly shit, and she follows. The dizzy wizard tells Serenity that they are in search of the fabled sugar plum candy pusher, a mysterious old hermit who sells candy that will never enter the market. "I just gotta have it," he says. Serenity tells him that if he takes her to Tempest, she will begin to have sugar plum pusher's candy imported to Nibu. The dizzy wizard stops and looks into her eyes. He walks up to her real close and stares into her freckled face. Serenity smiles and says, "I promise." Dizzy stares at her for another moment, then blows a great big bubble into her face that pops all over hers and gets into her hair. We see the wizard and Serenity comedically rolling around trying to pull the cartoonishly large glob of gum from her hair. Behind them, Mistress Sheila Scorn appears. The dizzy wizard hears something. "Shh, shh, shh, shh." Serenity screams, "Shh, quiet, quiet, Serenity. I hear someone." He turns and sees the pale-faced, multi-eyed diplomat in her black dress and just about scares the living sugar out of him. The dizzy wizard screams and on instinct shoots a blast of scorching hot Dizzy Whiz Fizz soda from his hand while running away with Serenity in his arms. Sheila teleports out of the way and appears in front of the wizard. She pleads with him to calm down, and he eventually does. Mistress Scorn politely encourages the dizzy wizard to hand over Serenity. Without giving him too much information, she assures him that doing so is for the sake of the planet. The dizzy wizard explains that he will not hand over the girl to a stranger because the girl is on a candy adventure. Scorn has no idea what a candy adventure was, but with his loving personality and charm, she couldn't speak or form logic around his monumental charisma, and for once she was at a loss for words. Everybody likes the wizard. Why can't Nova be this pleasant, she thinks. Scorn exhales, then teleports beside Serenity, grabs her, then teleports away. The dizzy wizard spins around, looks in his coat pockets for a candy bar and finds one. Then he looks for where Mistress Scorn went. There was no one around. He takes a bite of his Dizzy Fizz Whiz. We cut to Atlas headquarters. Its prestigious structure stands tall as a landmark of the Evolution District. Even in Jeremiah's absence, the sheer amount of security surrounding the premise was quite impressive. We see Jeremiah's vice president at the top floor office on 3 phone calls at once. What takes an above-average CEO to do in hours, Jeremiah could do in his sleep. But someone had to hold down the fort, and this was the best he had. She handles each call, easily closing 2 deals on restaurants across the district and opening a Dizzy Fizz Whiz factory for a new agent of theirs. She sits back and takes a breath. How does Jeremiah do it, she thinks, as she takes a sip of Steel Block's brew. Suddenly, all the lights in the office go out for a split second, then cut back on. The vice president spits out her coffee when she sees the entire room is filled with yokai assassins. One comes striking from the ceiling, cutting the entire steel desk in half with an omnium blade. Before she could react, the yokai kicks her head back into a seat and then impales her on it, leaving the sword there. Meanwhile, the other yokai have rigged the entire building with black market explosives imported straight from the Nagamoto pipeline in Dorinthia. Atlas helicopters are shot out of the sky as assassins claim the lives of many who try to stop the Nagamoto siege. The signal is given and the bombs are ignited, obliterating and leveling the entire Atlas building to ground zero. However, not before stealing a large portion of its resources. The the yokai has successfully destroyed all of Atlas Corp's Haven operations. The Nagamatos have secured a supreme foothold in Haven City. We see Akira Nagamoto sitting in a special cell within the quarters of a corrupted Nebi councilman. Since Amanda V's takeover and her imprisonment, Akira has demonstrated immense patience and tactics by telepathically swaying the decisions of various council members with strong suggestions resulting in many security risks, such as allowing Akira to be free from high security bondage like everyone else. Akira forces her captor to allow her to learn council plans as well as the internal map of the base. Infatuated with the queen of the underground, the councilman steps aside and lets her access his computer, as he has done so many times in the past. Cloaked in invisibility, Dennis Bateman stalks the pathetic councilman around the corner and goes to report his findings to Jeremiah. We cut to Jeremiah whispering into Amanda V's ear, prompting her to accept a significant trade agreement with some Haven kingpins. All of his phones begin ringing all of a sudden and pop up on holo screens. J.O. sees his beloved tower destroyed via news footage. J.O. throws his glass across the room, shattering it against the wall. The mental Jin Dennis Bateman appears, startling him so bad that he gets ready to punch Dennis in the head out of anger, but catches himself. Dennis informs Jeremiah of the councilman's special treatment of the Nagamoto girl. Jeremiah looks at Amanda V almost as if to blame her for the lack of dependency in her people. And then he marches to the council chambers with bodyguards. Jeremiah's Nebi guards burst through the door and sees the councilman tending to his duties while Akira sits pretending to read, free from bondage. She was actually coordinating with the Watanabe crime family, securing stolen information, as well as working on getting out of here, doing so behind the guise of her book. The councilman looks frightened, but appalled that this foreigner would intrude in on his space. Jeremiah approaches and interrogates him, catching him in lies, and exposes his lackluster ability to imprison the girl. The councilman curses Jeremiah and tells him he has no power in Nebu, oblivious to Jeremiah's influence over Nebu. He had all the power. With a snap of his fingers, Dennis Bateman appears behind the councilman and snaps his neck, then slowly and quietly guides him to the floor. Jeremiah looks at Akira next, but she takes this as her cue and darts toward the window, leaping out of it. Jeremiah commands his guards to go after her. We see Akira running across the Nebi Council chamber rooftops, avoiding guards on patrol up there by telepathically forcing them to pay attention elsewhere. A squad of Nebi soldiers, led by Jeremiah's guards, are dropped from airships and proceed to gain on her as she reaches the edge of the roof. Akira turns around and faces them, her heels on the edge. Everything goes silent, and suddenly, a warcopter rises up from behind the building Akira is standing on. The hatch to the warcopter opens up, and there we see, mounted on a heavy laser turret, is Death Trigger, smiling and happy to use his new toy purchase. Death Trigger unleashes an endless wave of laser fire, eradicating all of the guards and even destroying some of the building itself, all without sound. A scene of utter destruction and silence. Akira jumps toward the copter, but is shot in the ankle just before leaping, sending her plummeting to her death when suddenly Muramusa reaches from out of the copter and grabs his sister's entire arm, pulling her up into the vehicle effortlessly. Muramusa helps Akira up and tells her that they will never split again. Death Trigger presses a button, sending a shredder missile into the chambers, killing half of the council, then takes them out of harm's way and evading all of the black chains shooting from the sky. Death Trigger watches as bizquirks pour into his bank account from the Watanabes. "Well, that was easy," he utters. We cut to Jeremiah on an important phone call. He informs the futurist that the throne the Nebi sculptors have been slaving over has been completed. We see a large tarp get removed from a throne made of Nebunese gold that sat upon an obsidian pyramid. The futurist is pleased. Their agreement is going as planned. The call ends. The call ends just as Death Trigger's laser barrage is seen but not heard, the purple sky lit with laser light. What the hell could that be, Jeremiah thinks. Now is the worst time for something to go wrong. He looks over to Selena and tells her to stay on guard. Selena pulls her blonde hair back behind her soft ears. Dennis Bateman runs into the room out of breath and reports that the Queen of the Underground has escaped. Who the fuck is the Queen of the Underground, Bateman? Joe asks, triggered by the nickname. Dennis was into self-proclamations, having quite the ego himself. He admired her background, respected her nickname, and so he called her that. He explains that he meant the Nagamoto girl. Jeremiah begins to flip his lid when suddenly a mighty, bellowing roar of pain is heard coming from the sky. Jeremiah and Selena run up to the window and look up with everyone else. We see a black humanoid creature with massive glowing blue eyes reaching from out of a dreamy hypnotic vortex, digging its claws into the neck of the basilisk as it pulls itself out of the vortex completely. A mysterious and cold being, the Illuman, begins siphoning the dream essence out of the Atlas basilisk at an alarming rate, in turn strengthening itself. The basilisk tries to shake off the creature but can't, as it grows stronger and stronger, feeding off of the futurist's dream magic like succulent fruit. The power of dreams really is endless, it snarls, just before diving into the meat of the basilisk, fangs first. This violent disruption turns all of the black chains that are suppressing the Nebi people's chi into fine dust. This creates an ample opportunity for the Nebi heroes on the ground to act. We cut to the jails beneath the council chambers. A Nebi guard returns to his post for the remainder of his shift. He turns the corner and is met with the light so incredibly blinding, his nose begins to bleed. Nyla slams him into a wall and snaps his neck in 3 places. Behind her, we see Vector Issa pulling his fist out of the face of a guard, then slowly removing his shaman's talisman from the undeserving's neck. Vector and Nyla escape the prisons and begin to fight their way through the council building to freedom. Nyla swiftly moves from foe to foe using lethal techniques, dispatching them supported by Vector, tossing enemies aside with his gravity manipulation. They get to the outside and see Amun and the Pillar of Nebu fighting their way toward an Atlas monument recently built in the center of the Nebu capital. Vector, the scholar he was, immediately identifies the structure as a summoning monument. He deduces that if Nebu's heroes are headed there, then it must be where Serenity is. We cut to Jeremiah on top of the monument looking stressed. He's expecting company and all of a sudden all hell is breaking loose. Jeremiah peers down the monument and sees the Nebi heroes approaching. He looks over at Selena and asks her to stay close. He tells the same to his bodyguards. Selena is amused by how high-strung the puny man was. Jeremiah then makes a few phone calls, then puts his phone away. Suddenly, a black vortex opens up, and walking through it we see the futurist step onto the monument. He wore a similar mask as Deftude, but was garbed in a tattered, hooded robe bearing the crest of the Bloodvein dynasty. Jeremiah has never met the futurist in person, however we recognize this hooded entity as one of the 5 scientists who worked beside Deftude under Bloodvein's life science branch. Soon after, another black hole opens up, and Deftude emerges from it holding Nam and Rez's baby in his arms. The futurist greets Jeremiah and thanks him for his competence. Jeremiah thanks the futurist for bringing his dreams to reality and tries to bring his attention to the creature attacking his Atlas Basilisk right now, as well as Nebi armies making their way up the monument steps. The futurist looks up at the Basilisk, and with the wave of his hand increases the Atlas Basilisk's strength. The Basilisk attacks Illuman the only way it can, with its dark chains, but the Illuman was like a tick, growing stronger and impervious to everything being thrown at him. Illuman continues to devour and siphon the dream energy out of the Basilisk. The futurist begins to realize the Basilisk is being eaten and wasn't strong enough to deal with whatever it was. Deathtude asks the futurist what's going on up there. The futurist tells him that it's all under control, and he causes the entire Basilisk to explode so that Illuman cannot gain any more power from it. Illuman, now satiated with the most fulfilling dream power it had ever consumed, hovers above, stuffed and slightly exhausted. It opens up a rift into its realm and returns to it. The futurist looks in awe. He didn't know what that was, but as long as it was gone for now, and no longer interfering, then all was good. The futurist turns back to Jeremiah and tells him that those rebels are for him to deal with, and reminds him how important it is to hold up his responsibilities. Jeremiah understood what this meant. Whoever the futurist's friends were, they had business to tend to. Deathtude walks over to the empty throne that sits inside the summoning circle and places down Nam's baby. Another hole opens up, and walking through it, we see a third masked scientist step through, along with him, his apprentice. A valuable G-type who, after 50 cycles, has finally been perfected. Corrigan was solely created to manipulate the tank itself for emergencies like this, and he is the reason the core of the planet has been warming up as he attempts to move it every day. Deathtude asks this masked scientist how much longer do they have before the Virgin Tears fire the World Swell cannon. The masked man tells him within minutes. Deathtude orders Corrigan to begin moving the tank out of the way and onto the Yasplinia belt until they have finally and fully exited the Nifo system. Corrigan begins to focus and move the entire tank in order to evade the Virgin Tears' attempt to destroy what they cannot own and control. Deathtude asks if the element of the mind is here, referring to Serenity, to which the futurist replies yes, and asks Jeremiah to fetch her. Jeremiah makes a phone call, pretending that he didn't just ship her off with the Dizzy Wizard to a pirate. He regrets to inform the futurist that the child is missing, which of course upsets the futurist immensely. 3 more black holes appear, and in steps the remaining 3 masked scientists, each bringing with them fruits of their labor and a piece of the larger puzzle. The 4th masked scientist steps through and tells the futurist not to worry. Entering by his side, we see Mistress Scorn, and with her, all 3 elements of the Trinity Vitae: Amelia, Rose, and last but not least, Serenity, each bound in webbing. "Oh, there she is," Jeremiah mumbles. The futurist gives him a long look. The 5th masked scientist is accompanied by 4 Necro Guardians. Looper Ken, Poke Turner, Aerod, and Janiva each stand in their normal attire, when in the blink of an eye their Gygus armor begins to grow around them, forming the dark exoskeleton the Gygus is known for. Hypnotized by darkness, each of them stand in alliance with the masked lords of the Endless, and are tasked with keeping them, and especially the trio of girls, safe throughout the entire ritual. Deathtude is pleased to see all of the ingredients presented in time for the ritual of the Endless, a ritual that the instigator has tried to stop by hiding the fist of the Endless from him. Now with a worthy vessel, created just for the Endless Emperor Nuad, it didn't matter where on the planet the fist was hidden. The ritual will pull his soul from the fist and place it into this child's body to live complete and rule this planet that they created just for him. A factory of souls, and endless vessels for all necrofiend liches to consume, over and over again for eternity. As a show of peace and loyalty, Deftude has also gathered the 3 young girls to be destroyed in front of their emperor, for they each are weapons created to destroy him. Though once one being, the instigator cloned them into 3 separate ones to make it harder for him to find, but Deftude was always steps ahead. And here we are now, all the pieces, all the sacrifices. Deftude turns to Nam's child, soon Emperor of the Endless, and begins his incantation. Amun, Ra, Obelisk, Vector, and Nyla get halfway up the monument when they are suddenly attacked by a large metallic aircraft swooping in, impeding their progress. Appearing in the doorway of the craft, the Collective steps forward with her jagged mechanical arm, looking as menacing as ever. Beside her, Jace Beleren, another Atlas operative, steps in with glowing blue eyes. They both leap out of the craft and onto the monument steps. Last to join them is a muscular man who appears in the doorway of the craft, equipped in a suit of interlocking angular metallic plates with black ballistic weave under it. Henri Gosselin. The entire aircraft begins to bend and morph all around Henri, binding itself to his armor as he falls toward the steps and lands on both feet with a loud smash, breaking the stone steps on impact. Atlas had enforcers. And since day one, these were the individuals who made sure no one opposed Atlas. It seems they have joined Jeremiah on his overseas ventures. Amun is already forming a plan in his head and identifies that the largest thug can manipulate metal. He instructs Obelisk to zero in on him. Obelisk charges them, unleashing a barrage of his own superior energy at his targets, but all guarded by large metal plating now orbiting around the enforcers as they stand in formation. Nyla runs up to the Collective, but completely forgets her next move and even who her enemy is as a large metal plate slams into her, knocking her off the monument. But Vector captures her with his gravitational pull. He then tries to disrupt their formation by force pushing them apart, but is immediately electrocuted by a cloud of biting nanobots swarming him. Amun sits back and watches the skirmish unfold. With Xenosight, he can see that his foes are deceptive and their tactics are lethal. Amun sets his Xenosights on the guy with the glowing blue eyes standing in the back. As soon as he does, Jace Beleren looks at him and they lock eyes. Just as Amun figured, a telepath. Amun develops a perfect plan using his absolute mind and leaps into the fray. The tide of the skirmish begins to tilt in Atlas's favor. They seem to be countering everything the Nebi heroes throw at them. This is because Jace Beleren enlightens his allies with the telepathic link, using the absolute memories he stole from Amun's perfect plan, in turn devising their own countermeasures. Obelisk, now a hulking hyper-swift powerhouse, strikes repeatedly at the metal-clad Henri Gosselin. Henri's armor was incredibly advanced. It was designed specifically for him and its modular plate weave allowing for significant mobility. If he wasn't evading Obelisk's massive black and gold gauntlets, he was deflecting them using the Collective's metal-coated nanobots forming into shields for him. Obelisk's fist breaks through the dense cloud of nanobot shields, but not so much when his fist crashes into the shield Henri formed of solid metal, damn near breaking Obelisk's hand. "Try getting through that one," he says, and goes to pull metal from his suit that forms into 2 ultra-sharp knives meant for going for the kill. Henri swing flips off of Obelisk's massive arms and lands on his shoulder. Just as he proceeds to impale his neck, Obelisk's entire body rotates into a spinning ninjago kick, hitting Henri square across his body, hitting all pressure points and destroying his entire nervous system. He spins around horizontally in place, then lands hard. Obelisk instantly follows up, appearing from above Henri, crashing down with his knees. Henri's bloodstream is filled with nanobots that are constantly healing and reconstructing his nervous systems, almost instantly allowing him to move again. He rolls out of the way as Obelisk crashes into the steps like a meteor, and in one motion, Henri returns to the Obelisk, impaling the brute with a massive double-handed claymore blade. Obelisk, impervious to pain, grabs it before it penetrates too deep and breaks the sword with his bare hands. His superiority growing, he prepares to blast Henri when suddenly Dennis Bateman appears behind Obelisk with a suffocation net that attaches itself to his large neck and forms a field of space around Obelisk's head, absent of all oxygen. Obelisk begins thrashing about, suffocating. Ra, still in shock that she's fighting for Nebu along with their heroes, hesitates, but finds her place in the fight. She sets Bateman's blue suit ablaze and causes his gun to combust. Ra runs over to Obelisk and melts the suffocation net to the touch, freeing him from it. Henri Gosselin charges at Ra as dozens of sharp objects protrude from his morphing metal armor suit. Ra doesn't flinch, and she swings her arms, dispersing a wave of heat that turns Henri golden hot. Holding him at bay, she pushes forward and begins to cook him in his own armor, when suddenly, she forgets how to use her power. She stops and looks at her hands, just as Obelisk appears in front of her and captures a flying shard of hot metal intended for her head. Obelisk tells her to focus and stay on guard. Ra begins to remember again, though slightly befuddled. Vector tries to attack the Collective, but she oppresses him with nanobots he can hardly detect. Their electric bites were beginning to wear him down, but he manages to possess the Collective and forces her to rip her mask off and attempts to gouge her own eyes out. The Collective's prosthetic arm begins to spaz out. It was entirely comprised of a nanobot swarm and thus operated separately from her own body. It grabs and digs its sharp-pointed claws into her real arm and pulls her fingers away from her eyes. The Collective becomes increasingly violent and enraged and begins causing her nanobots to explode with large bursts of electricity, with reckless abandon, even hurting her allies. Nyla dives and protects Vector from the explosion just above him. With a mind filled with Jace Belaren's thoughts and memories, Vector elbow strikes Nyla, perceiving her as his enemy. Nyla captures his next attack and puts him in a chokehold, attempting to talk sense into him. Jace Beleren slowly walks the perimeter untouched, controlling the tide of the fight. Amun teleports from above Jace, but because they are telepathically linked now, Jace steps out of the way, and just before Amun can move in to take Jace out, Nyla and Vector attack him. Amun begins defending himself from his mind-warped allies. All was well, until Jace Beleren begins to sweat profusely as his body heats up to dangerous levels. Ra focuses her power on him as he tries to befuddle her brain again, but he finds it impossible to focus his telepathy and concentrate while so hot. Obelisk smacks Henri off of the monument with immense strength, sending him flying off the endless steps to the base of the pyramid-shaped monument. Ra spots several nanobots crawling in her face and hair, but it was too late. They explode and electrocute Ra, sending her flying off of the path as well, and landing through the roof of a town building below. Vector and Nyla return to their senses and regroup with Amun and Obelisk. The Collective begins to speak to them, all in short bursts of fast, sporadic, broken sentences. She speaks of an inferiority, knowing your place, and her glorious nanobots. Jace Beleren's eyes begin to glow brighter and brighter as he infiltrates each of their minds, manipulates their memories, and turns them against one another. However, Amun resists and finds himself defending from his allies, Obelisk and Vector, all while trying to stop them from killing each other as well. Suddenly, Selena Rend leaps from out of the void and finishes off all three of them by leaping onto Obelisk's back, inflicting several grave wounds before kicking him off the structure. Selena then overwhelms Amun and Vector with her incredible power and enchantments. Selena has Vector by the face with both hands and attempts to crush his head in with hers, but Amun kicks her in the back, but she turns around and slashes him open with razor-sharp claws. She then turns back to Vector and rips his throat out with her bare hands and tosses him off the pyramid. Jeremiah smiles and turns back around to the Futurist and Deftude, conducting the endless ritual. Everything was going as planned. Selena begins walking back up the steps along with the Collective and Jace when suddenly a voice calls out to them from the bottom of the steps. The Atlas group turn and see a dorky-looking young man, and beside him, a slender, expressionless guy with no eyebrows. The dork was Vulcan Almighty, a planet dimension scientist and practitioner of antimatter magic. Beside him is Omnimus, a cosmic byproduct he pulled straight from the planet dimension. The collective laughs. Her jagged arm covers her mouth as she holds back her chuckles. Vulcan and Omnimus look serious. Omnimus steps forward. Destiny has marked this day for your defeat. Vulcan holds his arm out as Omnimus begins to bind and fuse with him, forming one being. A storm brews over his head as the transformation unfolds. Vulcan Almighty and Omnimus become one being, Omni Almighty. They don't become larger or more muscle-bound, but instead become an endless fountain of cosmic power. The cosmos can even be seen within Omni's body. This power bestowed by Omnimus was called Maximum Power, and when he fuses with others, it became theirs. Omni Almighty begins walking up the steps. He is soon ambushed by Dennis Bateman, who appears from his invisible state and tries to push Omni Almighty's wig back with his silenced pistol, but Omni traps him in a magic sigil, locks him in place, then flicks a star into Dennis Bateman's forehead, causing him to backflip 700 times, flying off into the distance. The Collective and Jace Beleren go to meet Omni Almighty halfway, but are immediately imprisoned in a cosmic Maxim construct and is then launched out of his way to be dealt with later. Omni Almighty was something else. Selena Wren looks intrigued by this guest's power. She can even sense magical properties around him. Oh yes, it had to be magic. Selena void steps toward Omni Almighty and ends up close enough to take his head off, but is bombarded with 1,000 fists from 1,000 clones that shoot out of Almighty, stunning her. He then draws in all the dream energy in the area to empower his incantation, and with one swift hand gesture he unleashes a magic blast point blank at Selena, sending her flying up the steps by Jeremiah's feet. J.O. looks down at her and tells her to get up and do her void and magic stuff. Selena leaps up and grabs J.O. by his tie. Shut up! Omni Almighty continues to walk toward the top of the monument when suddenly Serenity comes running down it, screaming for help from Omni Almighty. Before Serenity reaches him, Omni Almighty forms Panetherium seals with his fingers that summit 2 large planet dimension portals on both sides of Serenity. Within seconds, a belt of asteroids comes shooting across the portals, hitting her like a train, but immediately revealing it was a greater abyssal beast doppelganging as it gets mutilated. He then casts an antimatter magic veil upon all of Selena's jewelry, dispelling them. She finds herself handicapped unexpectedly against the cosmically esoteric magician. Selena goes to attack Omni Almighty one last time, relying on her speed and strength, none of which were useful against Omni Almighty's fused Maximum Power. He repels her with antimatter gravity fields and hurls her across the sky. Selena crash lands inside of the capital city's fish market. She leaps up out of the carriage of fish and hisses at passing onlookers. She begins to make her way back to Omni Almighty when suddenly, one of her oldest amulets begins to heat up and vibrate intensely. Selena looks down and sees her amulet crack, and pouring out of the amulet was an incorporeal entity named Iglis, who has been imprisoned in her amulet for an eternity. Now in a weakened state, and with her enchantments temporarily dispelled, having all of their charge drained, Iglis, a rival abyssal being, breaks free and begins to infiltrate Selena's vessel. We see Selena shrieking and flailing about as Iglis rips the control of her body from her grasp. Selena tries her best, but is too weakened and unprepared to deal with Iglis's bottled up strength. 60,000 years gives me such your crook in the neck. Your body is mine. Iglis, using his soul swap ability, completely takes over Selena's abyssal body and discards her soul back into the void where she came from. Iglis stands looking at his new, beautiful, and tight body. Annoyed by the long blonde hair, he takes a nearby butcher knife to it and even lops off some of his scalp in the process. Iglis could care less about how beautiful he looked. He was happy to be free. We cut back to Jeremiah, who we see stepping backward and stumbling as Omni Almighty approaches the ritual floor. The futurist curses Jeremiah and screams for him to handle the intruder. Jeremiah sends his Atlas bodyguards after Omni Almighty, but they aren't able to get close as he launches a barrage of cosmic stars that completely obliterate them on contact. Jeremiah tries to bargain with Omni Almighty. Who sent you? I'll pay you double. Omni Almighty frowns. The Haven Guard are uncorruptible, Omni Almighty says as he prepares to imprison Jeremiah, when suddenly, black chains shoot from the black holes and bind his arms. Deftude steps in between Jeremiah and Omni Almighty, holding cards in between his fingers. Omni Almighty speaks. I don't know who you are or what planet you are from, but you can't stay here. Deftude laughs and tosses out 4 cards, and in their place, powerful manifestations from Rezanok's childhood comic book, The Gamma Friends, appear. The Alta District Protector, Manowar, the pious fishmonger, Friar Fish, the spirited Nebi warrior, Excelsior, and the unstoppable Rhino all appear in their classic, iconic, and colorful comic forms. Rhino doesn't waste any time and charges toward Omni, no questions asked, but he captures him in a cosmic prison. Rhino doesn't stop moving and manages to crash right through the maximum power and gorges Omni with his large horn, bloodying him. Manowar, Excelsior, and Friar Fish all join in, attacking the powerful Omni Almighty at once, but it was Manowar's godly black hole affinity that eventually overcomes Omni. After Friar Fish lays an aquatic smackdown on Omni, Excelsior shoves him into a black hole, to which Omni appears on the other end, thrown out into the stairs. Weakened, Omni Almighty pulls himself to his feet and begins to cast a barrier of protection, but is apprehended and held in submission by the mighty Manowar and Gamma Friends. Jeremiah laughs maniacally, descending from the steps, rolling up his sleeve. I like the Haven Guard, I really do, but maybe one day we can become partners. Atlas would love to throw money at the whole hope thing y'all got going on. Jeremiah comes face to face to a weakened Omni Almighty, held in place by Deftude's Gamma Friends. Black chains bind Omni Almighty's wrists and forces his hand open. Jeremiah closes in. This isn't personal, my friend, it's just business. He then shakes Omni Almighty's hand. Jeremiah laughs, then backhands Omni Almighty. He then tells him to kill himself. Omni Almighty begins to feel himself lose control of his body due to Jeremiah's accursed handshake, and is immediately forced to unfuse himself in order to escape the curse. Upon unfusing, both Omnimus and Vulcan Almighty are incredibly weakened and need to recharge. The unstoppable Rhino picks both of them up and tosses them off the structure. We see a large blue light soar across the sky, causing the entire tank to shake and rattle. This was the Virgin Tier's world swell cannon, barely missing the planet. Corrigan is at full power, moving the tank through space, out of their current star system, and on their way to the Necrofiend's home system, returning with their beloved Emperor, or soon to be. The futurist beckons Deftude to finish the ritual, and Deftude heeds him and does so. Deftude and the other 2 masked men begin waving their arms in unison, going through all of the necromagic semantics while humming deep guttural incantations. The power of the ritual begins to draw the spirit of Nuad from the fist of the Endless deep within the Void Realm and places it inside Nam's child, possessing him fully, making him the new Emperor of the Endless in the flesh. All of the masked Endless Lords kneel before the baby as a show of loyalty and respect. Deftude greets his Emperor, then calls over Geneva, the Queen of Darkness, who has been given the responsibility of raising the Emperor, under the protection of the Necro Guardian Gygus. Deathtude hands Geneva the infant emperor. Looper, Poke, and Arold were convinced that the Endless and their emperor is what will save the planet and benefit the greater good. They wouldn't be wrong. Mistress Scorn watches as it all comes into fruition. A deal with Necrofiends couldn't go wrong. The money she would make from a Gamma-type slave trade far surpassed any loyalty she had to the Virgin Tier's galactic expanse. Deathtude pulls out a sacrificial knife and begins to circle Amelia, Serenity, and Rose. Our Lord, Emperor Nuad, these three before you are fruits of the instigator's treacherous nature. Elements of life, mind, and absolute energy in the form of enhanced mutants weaponized and designed to one day destroy you. But not on my watch. I have spent lifetimes getting us here to this moment so that you will never be locked away again, my lord. Deathtude gives an extended monologue of the importance of gathering the Trinity Vitae, as well as the specific order in which they need to be killed, which causes each of the girls to start crying in fear for their lives. Deathtude kneels behind Serenity with the knife across her neck and goes to slit her throat when suddenly her entire body splashes into a puddle of sweet-smelling mint mirage dizzy whiz fizz soda. Everyone, including Deathtude, are surprised. The futurist gasps and cannot believe his eyes. Deathtude looks at the masked man tasked with gathering the Trinity Vitae, who is also at a loss for words. Whatever ruse this was, it completely surpassed everyone's senses. Jeremiah dramatically gasps, "Oh no! She's a decoy?" Deathtude is seething with anger and doesn't know who to blame. All he knows is that the Emperor Nuad will have all of them dead if this error isn't fixed. Before Deathtude could say another word, the entire sky is suddenly filled with Yaga light. Everyone on the planet looks up in awe at the glorious light. No clouds, no fog of pollution in sight. Nebi slaves who have strayed from the path are immediately reminded of the Yaga light and the way of Yaga. They recognize Yaga light and begin to pray to the sky for their freedom. We cut to John Musketmouth and the Dizzy Wizard on his pirate ship getting drunk off of old Raylagarian ale. The Dizzy Wizard's presence brought so much joy and laughter to the ship that John kept him around a little bit longer than he thought he would. John puts his arm around the Dizzy Wizard, and their entire crew sings and chants old pirate tunes. They then get back to business. The Dizzy Wizard hands over his captive, the real Serenity, over to John, who is always game for a valuable ransom or two. But what he didn't know was that Serenity was probably the last hostage any pirate would want to have right now. As planned, John hands over some Gamma eggs meant for Jeremiah Oliver. These were straight from Monster Island and were heavily modified. Suddenly, the sky is illuminated with intense Yaga light, and the entire pirate crew looks up in awe. While the Dizzy Wizard is looking away, John Musketmouth gives the signal to one of his pirates, who switches out the Gamma eggs with normal painted eggs, all without the wizard noticing. John's pirates were competent, slippery thieves as well. John thanks the eccentric Dizzy Wizard and tells him to get off of his ship. We cut back to the top of the ritual monument, where we see all of the masked Endless lords retreating into their portals, escorted by their guardians along with their captives. The last one in is the futurist, who stops and looks at Jeremiah. He tells him that their business together has concluded. He stops one more time and tells J.O. in cryptic fashion that his decisions today have sealed his fate. He then exits into the portal. Jeremiah gulps, then turns around to view his Nebi kingdom still smoldering from the rebellion. Amanda V walks up beside him and asks him if he has any ideas what this illumination in the sky is. Jeremiah shakes his head, pulls out his cell phone, and begins making phone calls. We cut to Ivan's white milky eyes and pale old face as we pan out slowly. Behind him, we see thousands of workers and gate hostages with enchanted slave collars around their necks, hauling dead bodies extracted from morgues throughout dozens of underground cave tunnels. Ivan sensed Makai's departure from the planet and severance of the contract and knew it could only be one reason. Mama Yaga and her light. An ancient enemy that he's been preparing for because he knows what was next. And he even knew what was after that. The camera pans out more, and we see that Ivan is standing in the underground Survey Day caverns. Against their own will, we see gate scientists standing in front of containment tanks that store super vessels to be host to bodiless souls. We see Ivan's mother, a ghostly mirage gliding about being chased by children stolen from the gate center, keeping them entertained. Ivan knew Mama Yaga was returning, perhaps even with Makai, but he'd be damned if he let her come to claim the souls of his and her children. No, everyone's soul on this planet was going to be his and his mother's. Not the Endless, not Mama Yaga, but his and Mama's. The camera pans around to what Ivan is watching intently. We see an undead Rezanok wearing a long black network cloak, which represents his acceptance of eternal life and eternal service to Ivan and his network. Rezanok stands before the Icromancer with one arm extended out, bearing the fist of the Endless, as thousands and thousands of endless monstrosities are summoned by him, and they begin to pull the Icromancer from its roots of the Survey Day cave. Once uprooted, Ivan walks up to the Icromancer, pulling with him a puny vessel housing the soul of the instigator, who he has bound in chains like a dog in classic Ivan fashion. Ivan tells him to get to work. The soul of the instigator begins to reprogram the Icromancer so that it distributes souls as opposed to taking in souls, resulting in every single one of Anarchy's androids in the city to become possessed with the souls of the Abyss. This in turn created a new, sentient android race. Some attack civilians on sight. Some freak out and go crazy, but most embrace their new existence and begin to plot on their futures. Ivan looks to Rezanok and plots on his. He pats him on the shoulder and tells him it's time to prepare. The only thing recognizable about Rezanok was his glowing red eyes, now filled with hatred for deathitude and all enemies of Ivan in the Abyss.